Tonight, we delve into a very sensitive topic, and that is the security protocols during the era of uncertainties of terrorism threats. My name is Cornelius Omuse, and tonight we are joined by Mr. Philemon Samoei, who is a security and a physical expert. We are also joined by Mr. Ken Williams Nyakomita. Mr. Ken Williams Nyakomita is also a criminologist expert. We look into this matter as it's happening in the global space, where as we go back to history, in the year 1998 in Kenya we had a terrorist attack that is at the American Embassy and also in Tanzania. In the year 2001, as we go to the global map, we had the attack on the World Trade Center in the United States of America, which claimed thousands of lives. And it hasn't stopped there, because even as we speak, we are having our country fighting war in the country of Somalia, where the militant group of the Al-Shabaab has been terrorizing residents, that is in Kenya and even beyond. Join us in this discussion. Remember, this discussion is also live on our Facebook page, that is CAC TV Kenya. Our YouTube channel is also CAC TV Kenya. Keep it on CAC TV. Gentlemen, welcome tonight to Crime Must Fall Show. And maybe briefly, we'd like to hear from you. How about your areas and your analysis during this COVID period and before COVID, if we have ever experienced any terrorism threat, or it has gone down during this pandemic period, in summary?
Okay, thank you very much. Basically, I cannot say that terrorism have actually gone down, because the threats are usually there. As you know, security is a perception also of being safe. Mm-hmm. And yes, there were threats. Remember, before actually this particular pandemic actually comes on board, we had a high threat that was actually given by different government and different state agencies. And that situation hasn't changed. And because COVID-19 does not actually change the security operation or the security structure or even the threat. Mm-hmm. What I can say is that the threat is still there, because our preparation actually is what determines the level of the threat. Mm-hmm. And most of the companies or organizations, and even including the government, mm-hmm. I think they're still handling mm-hmm. The normal security operation of the state, mm-hmm. just normally. Normally, in this sense, all the apparatus are still actually aware mm-hmm. and keen on the security and safety of the citizen.
Thanks so much, Mr. Ken Williams. Let's also hear from Mr. Samoei's point of view and also his experience during the COVID pandemic period as far as terrorism threats are concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Cornelius. Perhaps the starting point would be for us to understand this animal called terrorism. Mm-hmm. Probably we've just gone straight into the issues mm-hmm. before letting our audience understand exactly what is this animal called terrorism. Mm-hmm. Maybe let me just take this opportunity mm-hmm. To probably define terrorism.
Actually, we were coming there.
Okay.
That was your part.
All right.
To tell our viewers to understand what is terrorism, because they say there is an impending terror attack, terrorists are planning to do this, but people have been having some sort of misunderstanding between gangsters, between robbers and terrorists. So kindly give us the definition of this term, or the animal as you put it, terrorism.
Thank you. Now, talking about terrorism, there is no universal definition of terrorism. To be specific on the issues touching on maybe creating terror to the citizens or the civilians. But by its definition, terrorism is just a violent way that these violent extremists use violence to intimidate civilians. Mm-hmm. And probably cause harm to the civilians. And therefore, in the contemporary terrorism, we will be talking about what is happening in the world today mm-hmm. as compared to the history about terrorism, how it started, probably as a lone ranger and now into the park rangers. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mr. Samoei. Let's get deep, because now what is coming out is that there are different types of terrorism. As you've given in your definition, it doesn't manifest itself in one way where you can say terrorism comes in this color or in this approach. So Mr. Ken Williams Nyakomita, briefly some of the types of terrorism that we experience in the global map.
Thank you very much. There are quite a number. I think some of the types have not even actually been realized. But as you are aware, is that most of these terrorist activity, they are either conducted by states themselves, and that actually falls under the state terrorist group. So apart from that, we also have like political, in that they are not only conducted by the state, the sitting government or the sitting power, but also the political element, who are actually also
Let's concentrate first and be particular in this matter because it's crucial. You've begun by the state-sponsored terrorism. Dig deep into it and let our audience understand what is state-sponsored terrorism, as Mr. Samuel will also be breaking into the political type of terrorism.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, if you look at purely what the terrorists actually are looking at, remember that terrorists usually, their target is properly to interfere with the democratic regime. And like when you look now at the state terrorism, fine, it's a democratic regime because we assume that, let's say the government actually that are sitting in place is a government that was legitimately elected. But still, the government actually have machineries, either because of the resources, and they actually plant these particular resources to actually destabilize either the opponent, purporting that it is actually the opponent that is destabilizing the state. So the state-sponsored terrorism, majorly, they actually use quite a number of machineries from the government itself. And these particular machineries that they use from the government itself, nobody actually is aware of it, because once they actually attack, even the government partially are not aware of what actually is transpiring. But once the attack happens, the destabilization actually make all the arms unstable. And as a result, the state actually that is sponsoring this type of criminal activity takes advantage of that, and actually some actually use this as a continuation of the regime, in that they'll actually determine this as actually the regime is not stable enough to actually either go for election, and this usually happens towards the election periods, whereby the sitting government does not feel comfortable actually to move or to give out the powers, or actually to go for a democratic election. So they sponsor these particular agencies to destabilize the government, so that they can actually neutralize them by the same government agencies.
Many thanks. So it's a problem caused, and then in the same process, something in pretense of finding a solution. Mr. Samuel, you are coming up with a political type of terrorism.
Yes. Talking of political terrorism, we are looking at issues revolving around governance and the state, or a nation state for that matter. And so political terrorism comes in various ways. Remember the old saying that says that another man's terrorist could be another man's freedom fighter. And therefore, it simply depends on which side of the bread is buttered for you to really delve into this issue of terrorism. Remember, we've also had allegations where the West is saying that certain countries in the Middle East are sponsoring terrorism, for that matter, whereas the Middle East also is blaming the West for sponsoring some terrorist kind of activities. And therefore, both qualify, whichever, as I've said, it depends which side of the bread it's buttered. And therefore, by that broad sense of terrorism and how different groups define terrorism, then therefore, we might want to say that state terrorism or political terrorism is meant maybe to intimidate a certain group of people that don't support a cause, be it a political party, or be it what I would call maybe just subscribing to one particular group among their adversaries. But talking of political terrorism, as we have said, is that the state, especially the incumbent, those in power, can actually use state machinery to suppress certain groups that probably don't ascribe or don't support their cause. And therefore, it is important for us to note that that automatically falls into political terrorism, where the state agencies may use
now,
the police.
there is one here that is usually very common, and you find even there are those ones who denies and others who accepts it. There's this thing called religious terrorism, where people of different walks of faith comes up, says that this has happened because of what these people believe in. Others say our religion does not believe in this, but it's becoming evident that it's one of the most highest types of it. So, Mr. Nyakomita, our viewers will want really to understand the logic behind religious terrorism as a type of terrorism.
People actually, they cover themselves with the term religion. Yes, there's a definition of religious terrorism, but they cover themselves on religion basis. On my research, and I've done proper research, there's no religion that actually supports terrorist activity. But once a given number of people actually brings into a group and try to actually radicalize a group of people, purporting that, when you worship this, when you do this, you actually enjoy things. Like most of the terrorists, they usually say that when you kill this number of people, then all the virgins are yours, and so on and so forth. These are myths because they are not factual, they have not been proven actually scientifically. But people lie on the religion. And you've seen quite a number of religions have actually been accused falsely that they either perpetrate terrorism activity, which is no. What I can say is that if you look at the ideology, because if you look at the modus operandi of terrorists, there are three major elements that they look at. And one is actually what we've discussed, which is purely political. Then the ideology, because what is the ideology? Because what does the Bible say if you're a Christian? What does the Quran say if you're a Muslim? What does any other book say if depending on that particular religion? And you'll remember that the religion also comes at a third point, that they will actually alienate themselves in either political ideology, we are frustrated and so on and so forth, or our religion perspective is actually either being undermined or postmined. But what I can say about religion terrorism is that these are people, I can call them an outcast, which have actually decided to separate from the normal teaching of a religion or religion basic, and they're actually trying to pass a different message, indicating that actually misleading the community or misleading the people that they're passing this information to, that this religion actually, if you do ABCD, still the God that we worship or whoever we worship will still treat you better than any other person, depending on the number of people that either kill or so on and so forth. But what I can actually testify is that when it comes to religion terrorism, it's only that it's part of a branch of religion, because people purport to be of a given religion. But there's no any religion that dearly support terrorist activity.
Many thanks, Mr. Nyakomita. Now, there's this one remaining about the criminal terrorism, which is also another aspect or another angle or a view that people have. They say, when they look at it after analyzing, they say these are criminal terrorism. And Mr. Samoit gives people that kind of confusion to understand what makes it now to be called criminal terrorism, or why is this not just a criminal act in itself. So the definition of that part also will be highly appreciated.
Remember, as my colleague has said about religious terrorism, it speaks into these perpetrators using religion as a tool to perpetrate their criminal activities. As he rightfully said, is that no particular religion actually supports maybe just maiming civilians and killing innocent people. All this is categorized as criminal activities because there is loss of life. And therefore, talking about criminal terrorism, these are people who engage in criminal activities, what I would call probably even organized crime, where people plan to attack, to do certain things that really appear to shake the population. So it's a tool. It's just a mere tool that people are perpetrating criminal activities and call it maybe terrorism. But also depending on the magnitude and the severity of that particular criminal activity, then we can classify that as probably criminal terrorism, going by the fact that probably it has affected many people or many lives have been lost resulting from that criminal activity.
Now let's come home, because there are usually characteristics, features and traits of a particular tendency or something before it happens or even when it happens, and the results. At the end of it all, when you as a forensic expert, you also as a forensic expert, when you come to a scene where something has occurred, you'll say this one is a terrorist activity or a terrorism attempt. There must be some sort of things to differentiate between accident, criminal activity, and also terrorism. So we want to look at these traits that when someone comes across it, they'll say that indeed this is a terrorism activity. And we begin from Mr. Nyakwamita as we let our viewers to understand to differentiate between terrorism activities and other acts of omission and commission.
I think handling that, you are supposed to look at, first of all, let us look at properly the basic and the logic of law. That these are acts that basically they're bad by themselves. And these are what we call actually the mala inse and the mala prohibita. You don't expect somebody to tell you or to communicate to you that beating somebody is bad. Because based on how you were brought up, these are things that they're bad by themselves. I usually say that you cannot actually purport to have killed somebody because he wronged you. You see, it is bad by itself. But apart from that, the government actually, or most government have come up with measures to say that, fine, you might actually justify that, for example, cattle wrestling or any other criminal activity is justified based on your community. But the government has come up to actually give prohibition that if you do this, these are the penalties and so on and so forth. And based on this prohibition, also, the government, most of government has also come up with like acts, like evidence acts, which also guides people in terms of looking for what exactly you should actually collect and you should look at when attending the crime scene. Now, before even look at how when you approach this particular scene of a terrorist, what are some of the things that actually will penetrate or will perpetrate you to know that really this perhaps is a criminal, which is a terror instigated crime. Remember, terrorism does not act just like a habitual or opportunistic crime that we were driving, I saw somebody and attacked somebody. Terrorism has phases. And these particular phases, all the phases will actually be attended to before the crime is committed. So nobody will just wake up in the morning and attack a place or so on and so forth. And when you look at these phases, we know that the first phase, let's look at the first phase, is the target selection. A terror group will not attack any place. First of all, they do a random selection. The hotel, the school, and so on and so forth. So they'll actually settle that, fine, we want the school. So how many schools and the number? Noting that terrorist actually is about the number. And what their intention is actually to seek sympathy and also do as high destruction as possible. Then after that, they also have the element of target selection. Target selection, sorry, then they have the element of target intelligence. In that, they will actually do intelligence. Yes, we've selected a school. So how do we collect intelligence? How do they operate? When do they open? What are some of the measures they have? What are the security operations they have? Do they search people? Do they search measures? They'll actually ensure that this particular element of intelligence, the properly collected intelligence. Because noting that terrorist groups are a well-organized group which have logistic, finances, and so on and so forth. Then there's also the element of operation planning. How they're going to actually attack this. Will it be on air, on land, on what? So they'll also ensure that the operation is properly adhered to. Then now they do the attack or a dry run. Now in the attack or dry run, that's when they'll actually come and throw something. And if the security personnel that you have on board are not keen, then something can stay there for even, let's say they've thrown a suspected toy explosive kind of. So it will be there for like 5 hours, 10 hours, and that will show that really it's very possible we can do this and nobody will actually detect this particular thing. So they'll do a dry run and just see if something blows or bursts, how do people respond and where do people run? Are there proper measures and the ABCD? Then lastly, the escape. how will they escape after the proper attack? Because after the attack, they also don't want to be actually cornered. They want to take off. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that when you get at the scene, all these elements shall have been actually done. So
after they have been done, now I'll have to stop you there as Mr. Samoei comes in now. You've given us the protocols, the procedures that these terrorists follows before they execute something, to an extent that you as the forensics experts will come and say these are terrorism scene or terrorism act. Now, Mr. Samoei, the detective part, where when you get to the scene, you will inform all and sundry that these are terrorism attack or an attempt.
Now, security revolves around certain aspects. And remember, as he said, is that these people would not just come and surprise people. It is a planned activity that takes a long period of time before they actually come into the execution phase. And it's worth noting that probably the security personnel on the ground need to really take care about what we call counter surveillance, probably as these surveillance agents will be moving around to select their target and see the modus operandi that they will, employ to execute the actual attack. Then it means the security personnel in that particular facility need to be cognizant about certain aspects. First of all, in terms of the counter surveillance, so that even before it gets to that phase, then someone will have detected something, that there is this strange face that has been moving around our facility and probably posing as a visitor or maybe just walking around for any other reason that may convince the security personnel at the entry point. Remember, they will always want to also take notes so that they look at the number of security layers which have been placed in that particular facility for them now to go and do the planning and the actual execution. And therefore, as a forensic expert in that field, your question which you asked earlier is that at what point do you determine that this is a terrorist act or just a mere criminal activity like theft or intrusion and theft of property for that matter. Now, as a forensic expert, number one, you must know that these people use different ways. As we said, the modus operandi. And this means that what the terrorists will use might be a bit different from what an ordinary criminal can use as a tool, maybe to launch an attack. For example, we have seen what happened in our country in the past. And we are looking at terrorist groups, employing certain explosive devices, either wrapped in bodies to conceal them, so that the security personnel are not able to detect them, okay? And that's where we are saying we need to be cognizant of the tools or what these people could be carrying, okay? And maybe, should that attack happen, then as a forensic expert, what am I supposed to do at that crime scene? Number one, I need to look at maybe the blast area, okay? Just to give me direction, or just to give me clues as to what type of tools these people are able to use to execute this kind of attack. Probably it was a blast. We may also want to look at maybe the violent extremist who is what I would call, who uses like the Garissa University attack. This is an active shooter, right? So active shooters, again, their modus operandi is a bit different from these ones who are deploying heavy explosive devices, or even the use of TNT and those other forms of ammonium nitrate to launch the explosion. But remember, talking of terrorism, it means that the perpetrators really want to capture the attention and maim as many people as they can. purely because of their ideology and their belief system, that they want to intimidate a certain group of people so that they support them or they give in to certain demands. And therefore, that in itself qualifies as terrorism and the kind of tools that these people have used. So as a forensic expert, you need to be careful, especially when you have cordoned the areas, okay? You need to take note and get to know exactly what happened. Were there these people who did the surveillance in the initial phase? How did the security personnel respond? How did they process them at the entry points? And how did they penetrate the various layers of security that are employed within a certain institution?
Many thanks, Mr. Samoei. Just looking at some of the comments and also questions, we have Manuel Lagat. He's saying, thanks CAT TV for this great show, following while listening, and I am being empowered. We are here to do so. We also say thank you, Emmanuel Lagat. And then there is a question coming from Rish Aaron Pareh. He says, is there any such thing as matrimonial terrorism? This one now goes to the experts to give us a brief answer if it exists or not before we go for a quick commercial break. Mr. Nyakomita, matrimonial terrorism.
Thank you very much, Muse. Just as I said that terrorism actually that different definition and different kind. But that's a unique one, because when you talk about matrimonial, basically this is more of a family tree, and unless we have a proper justification on how actually such can happen. But what I know is that basically in the normal definition or understanding of the terrorist and the kind of terrorism attacks, basing our mind on the three categories of political ideology and also religion, then those are the major one. Matrimonial can actually either fall under the three of the kinds.
Many things. We go for a short commercial break. As we come back, we'll now be looking into the protocols, into safety measures. How can individuals, citizens, the government, non-governmental stakeholders, and every other participant can play towards seeing that terrorism is combated, especially during this moment where there is a global concern about terrorism threats. After each and every terrorism act has been committed at a particular place, you'll get the post-analysis and even information that we saw particular individuals, suspicious individuals, who came to this place, and after a few minutes or few hours, this and that happened. And that's why tonight on Crime Must Fall show, we are looking into what is terrorism and some of the protocol steps that the terrorist groups and their sympathizers usually approach towards committing their heinous crimes against humanity. Keep it on CAT TV as we come back with more.
Tunasikitika kutangaza kifo cha mzee mshauri Kamau Mugenda, mkurugenzi wa masuala ya ushirika KEMRI. Mugenda aliaga dunia tarehe 9 mwezi Agosti mwaka huu 2020 baada ya kuugua kwa muda mfupi. Kamau Mugenda alishiriki katika kanisa la PCA Evergreen Presbytery Milimani Kaskazini. Ni mtoto wa marehemu Mugenda Ndugwa na marehemu Lucy Bayo Mugenda na mwana wa kambo wa Maria Wangari. Ni mume wa Anne Wangeshi Kamau na pamoja walijaliwa watoto Roslyn Bayo Kamau na Shalin Wanjiru Kamau. Ni mkaza mwana wa marehemu Narikson Gishuki na marehemu Gladys Wanjiru Gishuki. Mwenda zake ni ndugu ya marehemu Margaret Wambui wa Ganjo, Alfred Njenga Mugenda, marehemu Jen Wanjiru Amon, Phyllis Wederero Kamau, Wilfred Ndungu Mugenda na Alex Gitao Mugenda. Ni ndugu wa kambo wa Grace Wangui Maina, James Njenga Mugenda, Jacinta Wambui Mathu, Phyllis Wederero Mugenda, mchungaji David Gutu Mugenda, Jackson Kamau na Teresia Nyokabi Mugenda. Mwenda zake ni shemeji wa Grace na Daktari Kamau, Rose Gishuki, Phoebe Ngure na marehemu Nguru, Mary na Wanyambura Mwambia, marehemu Edward Gadhanga, Frasha na Lucy Gadhanga, Margaret na Paul Kimani. Mwili wa mwenda zake utatolewa katika hospitali ya rufaa ya Chuo Kikuu cha Kenyatta saa 2 asubuhi siku ya Jumatano na ibada ya mazishi kufanyika nyumbani kwake eneo la Weru, kaunti ndogo ya Kinangop kuanzia saa 5 asubuhi. Kutoka runinga CAT tunasema makiwa kwa jamaa na marafiki wa mwenda zake. Hafla hii ya mazishi itapeperushwa moja kwa moja kutoka Kinangop kupitia runinga ya KAK hapo kesho tarehe 12 mwezi wa Agosti kuanzia saa 5 asubuhi.
Life is a journey that requires a lot of preparation. Guys, are you ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Let's buckle up. A lot can happen along the way.
But this is everybody else.
Guy, ni kama sijabeba your deal.
Now what should we do?
I think we won't go. Yes, because I can't find it. But really, who is in charge of your journey? Beginning this Friday, Youth Tuko presents The Journey from 8 to 9 p.m. only on KAK TV. See you there.
Welcome back and many thanks for tuning in to KAK TV on Crime Must Fall Show. And tonight we have put our focus on this topic of terrorism, the protocol, the security measures and protocols that citizens are supposed to employ and all the players in the global context beginning from here in Kenya. We are having Mr. Philemon Samoe, who is a peace and security expert, and also Mr. Nyakomita Mark Williams, who is a security expert. They are taking us through this topic, bringing out the context of terrorism, the causes, and what is it necessary to be done in order to ensure that the rate of terrorism is reduced or even the losses that it causes. Keep it on KAK TV as we continue on the second part, looking on the way forward and what each and every individual is supposed to play towards combating this menace. And just looking at some of the comments and even questions, we are having one of our viewer, Bernard, all the way from Kahawa West. He says, great topic from the experts. More Kenyans need to undergo heat courses so as to be aware of our surroundings at all times. Many thanks, Bernard from Kahawa West. Emmanuel Lagat has posed another question that as a citizen, in what ways can I contribute in the fight against violent terrorism and extremism? At some point, that question of viewers, Emmanuel Lagat, will feature prominently as we'll be coming into the roles of the citizens as far as war against terror is concerned. Now, gentlemen, we have had a thorough look on this issue of terrorism, the origin, how it's conducted, and everything that surrounds it. But now it has come to that time where we have to look at these places that are more prone to terrorism attacks, beginning with homes, offices. We have entertainment joints. We also have the places where hospitality is catered. Now we are looking into some of the security or safety protocols. And let's begin with our homes where we stay, as I invite in Mr. Nyakomita to take us briefly through how each and every individual should participate as far as safety is concerned at homes.
Thank you, Muslim. Basically, what we have to understand is that, as we say, security and safety actually begins with you. And that's why the Professional Criminologists Association of Kenya, under the leadership of the chair of Mr. Mugambi, actually came up with a lot of platforms in how actually to do this at a basic level. Because they had, they're currently running quite a different number of programs, starting from primary school, secondary school, all the way to university, just to ensure that this particular scourge is actually properly understood with even a young person. But now to go to what actually you've actually asked is that, first of all, you have to understand that the four major Ds that each and every person, including the security officer or non-security officer, must actually understand in that, first of all, we have to be in a position actually to deter any kind of criminal activity. We also have to detect, because you cannot deter what you've not detected. And we also have to deny. And finally, we have to ensure that we have to delay then deny. Now, based on that, there are quite a number of things like routine activities. How do we actually make ourselves even vulnerable to criminal activity apart from even terrorism? It's because I, as a citizen, I know that I stay in place A. This particular place A, yes, the Nyumba Kumi initiative that was brought by the government, actually, it hasn't picked up well because people actually realize that quite a number of people are actually being like marked and being serialized as the people who are actually knows criminal more than any other person. But how do we actually associate by ourselves? I stay in place A, I use the same route, I use the same bus getting to my place. So this actually makes myself vulnerable because I get at home at 7 every day using the same route, opening the same gate, and actually operating with the same watchman or any other person. Now, based on that particular routine, as a citizen, first of all, we should actually try as much as possible to avoid routine activities. Now, secondly, I'd actually given a proper stages of terrorism, the phases of terrorism activity. These phases, we have to ensure that these phases are actually managed stage by stage, each phase. So if at all it is the first stage on actually target identification. So how do we actually deny the criminals from identifying our target? It's very difficult. But we can actually deny them from collecting intelligence. How do you deny this? It doesn't actually take the security personnel to do this. Any other citizen can actually do this. Because today I have seen actually somebody dressed in this particular dress. Tomorrow the same person, I've seen them just moving around, taking notes, taking pictures, and completely doing nothing in that particular establishment. So that's a red flag. So what am I supposed to do? You are supposed to report this to the local. Whether it is a normal person or somebody who doesn't have any bad intention, but reporting does not cost a citizen anything. Just report that I've seen 2 people recently walking around taking pictures, but they look strange because they're not people belonging to this particular place. So that is the first stage of actually ensuring that the intelligent perspective of terror stretch is actually terminated. Now, secondly, is actually like the logistic part. Or even collection of the information. How do we avoid that? Because remember, they'll actually have a dry runs. So how do we avoid that? Ensure that there's also a proper procedure. We stay in the estate, yes. Do we even have the basic entry book in our estate, whereby if I get in, I can indicate KBS has actually gotten in and KBS has left. So that if a strange car comes on board, then I can actually report that. Then also the system. The government has made it very simple for each and every person. Like now, the Association actually for Criminologists, they've come up with Crime Must Fall hashtag. It's just going to their private inbox and dropping a mail. And also, the police are actually there. They have actually made even the system to be very, very easy. Now, apart from that also, we also have to look at the system that we put on board. Genetics have actually come up with better systems. And even not only we have more advanced CCTV and so on and so forth, whereby you can actually detect when an item has actually been left for more than 5 minutes, or somebody is just hanging for more than 10 minutes, or the dress code. It's actually sunny and somebody is dressed in very heavy jackets, then that actually sends a suspicion. And you know, the police might not be all over. Sometimes actually we also have to help the government.
Many thanks, Mr. Nyakomita. Let's also hear from Mr. Samuel that these 3 crucial places, that is a public transport, we have entertainment joints and places of worship, which also serves as some of the major targets of the terrorism. Now, the protocols, safety protocols that you can give to our viewers as far as your training and understanding and experience of forensic investigative is concerned.
Thank you. Now, terrorism is about target selection. These people or these criminals will not target probably a facility or a place that doesn't have people, especially in the wake of, say, this COVID-19, where, say, places of worship do not have, many worshippers flocking into the place of worship. And therefore, it means something for the terrorist looking at the public transport system, probably again in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, probably not many people now are boarding public transport, and therefore the numbers are actually slightly down. I know we could or we may want to relate that situation with terrorism and whether it entices or it attracts the terrorist probably to want to execute an attack in these maybe 3 or so places. Entertainment joints, for example, assuming that this pandemic did not affect those entertainment joints or places of worship in the public transport system, where we have a huge chunk of people moving into these places in and out, then what does it mean for the terrorist? It means that is a ripe target for them to actually plan and hit so that they achieve, greater results of their intention and ideology. But having said that, as security experts, then we need to advise on what protocols or security or physical security measures need to be put in place to mitigate if there was going to be an attack, maybe to deter, okay, or in form of even detecting that a terrorist is planning to do ABCD. Now, our duty as security professionals, number one, is to ensure that you, first of all, detect that there is some suspicious activity that is taking place. As he said, these people don't live up in the sky. They live with us in our villages. They live with us in maybe public, the centers where many people live. They are within us. Now, it takes an individual. As it says, security starts with all of us. It's not a question of waiting for the police to come and detect that there is this particular suspicious person, there is this routine thing that is constantly taking notes, probably taking photographs of a very important or a critical facility to be targeted, These are things that the ordinary citizens need to be cognizant of, and they need civic education on how they need to report such kind of suspicious characters, maybe for the police to intervene, or even the local security arrangements put in place. And therefore, what does it mean to us, the security experts? That we must always do what we call risk assessment in all these 3 areas you have mentioned, that there ought to be a prior risk assessment. Okay, people may call it risk audit, others may call it a security survey, just to look at your premises, to look at what is happening at the bus termini, at the train stations, and all these other areas. Okay, so we might want to look at it from an institutional point of view and an individual point of view, like from the what we have discussed about where these people could be living, okay, and suspicious characters moving around, doing suspicious activities. Then what happens at the home level, right? That means this needs to be reported immediately to the authorities for them to take action. Be it a real terrorist or an imagined terrorist, we should not take chances. It's good that the police just process this person. If there is nothing to do with terrorism, I mean, really, I don't think the police would want to go ahead if there is lack of evidence to really prove that this person is engaged in some terrorist activities, and probably not in possession of explosive devices or some things that this person is trying to assemble. Now, looking at those areas you have mentioned, what are we supposed to do? Number one, we should be talking about access control. Let me institutionalize these because we cannot practice access control at the village level. But let me talk of an institution, say a religious institution. What happens at the entry point? Because we must, as a security manager of a facility, therefore I need to do a risk analysis, risk audit, and have a report and actually layer my security into the 4 layers, right? Right from the entry point as we move strategically into what I would call the critical areas within the institution. Now, what happens? From the word go, the 4 Ds will still cut across. That we need to strengthen the facility, what we would call target hardening, okay? So that it's not just a one-off thing that a terrorist comes or a criminal just comes and easily accesses, the area without barriers. So we must be able to put physical barriers, like at the entry points, at the gates, we must put strong gates, If it's for the night activities, operations, then we might need to put some proper lighting, within the perimeter, for the patrol guards to be able to, to detect and be able to see from far that probably there is an intruder who has scaled over the wall or probably is attempting to forcefully enter through the main entry point. That means we must strengthen our access control mechanisms. And also, as we said, we need to also detect from that entry point, okay? Suspicious characters will normally portray some signs, either non-verbal or even verbal, when these people, as the insecurity guy, maybe attempts to interrogate this person at the entry point. There are certain non-verbal body languages that you should be able to detect,
This and that is happening.
Yes.
Now, we are coming somewhere. The times that we are living, Mr. Nyakomita and Mr. Samuel, it is actually the digital era where we are having the internet, the computer, we have everything that we need. When we had a terrorism attack at the Nairobi embassy, the US embassy in the year 1998, I remember I was a very small boy and I had to walk close to 5 kilometers just to see a newspaper which contained what had happened and all that. But currently, even from the concern of some of our viewers, is that we are having technology. Looking at its merits and demerits, can it be used more to fight this terrorism, or its demerits are more as far as the war against terror is concerned? Mr. Nyakomita, I invite you actually to delve into this part of technology for fight against terror.
Fine, it has actually acted both ways. To some extent, it has actually helped in terms of passing information, in terms of prevention measures. To other extent, it has also actually necessitate or help the criminals actually in terms of recruiting more members online, because they can easily be shown what to do and how they can actually procure these particular attacks. But thanks to actually the Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Act of 2018, that of late actually hasn't come to enforce, but recently when actually the High Court actually passed that also, it's actually effective. And that's why you've actually seen quite a number of people have actually been arrested of late, or either posting or trying to scare people and so on and so forth. But what does actually all this entail in terms of the cyber-related criminal activities? Because we understand that, for example, today if I want to know the measures on how I can actually ensure that I keep myself or the company or organization safe from terror attacks, I can easily go online and do the same. But also if I want to know how to conduct the attack, still the criminals will actually also post that online to ensure that they also actually do, but also recruit more members. So what I can actually say about the cyber-related issue, the cyber-related crime has actually also come on board. I'm not saying that there's an increase of cybercrime since the COVID-19 actually lockdown started, but only that this particular act was not fully inactive. So when it came actually inactive, that's why we can actually see the charges. But also people have also taken advantage, because most of the transactions currently are being actually run online, because the Zoom, the meeting and so on and so forth are being run online. So criminals have also taken advantage. And remember, terrorism is not only a physical attack. It can also actually be a cyber attack, which is also a terror attack actually via the cyber. And this actually we've realized, though it's not all that common as compared to the previous normal attack. But what we actually have to understand about the cybercrime is that we are still going to experience a lot of it because of the usage of the network system currently. Because students, children, every other person is currently online, because life has to move on. So the best thing to do is that the entity should also actually take a proper orientation and awareness on cybercrime and how actually to prevent this, because now this now when we are going to actually have a lot of interference, because we are going to have more cybercrime activities than the normal physical crime activities, because people have actually changed, like the banks attack, even the shops and so on and so forth. And we've actually noticed that of late. Piracy have dropped, but still cyber is actually on board. So what are some of the measures that now the entity should actually take consider in this particular place? Now, there's going to be a lot of identity theft, which actually has taken place. People are actually using other people's identity to either defraud the institutions and actually commit further crimes. So I think as we go forward, what actually should now, the authority should actually invest more is actually ensuring that the public is aware about the cyber crime related activities that can actually help the public from not becoming a victim of these particular crimes.
Many thanks. Now, as we come to home stretch, because time is not on our side, we invite Mr. Samoei, and actually he'll be answering something that came from Lagat. Lagat talked of the role of citizens as far as fighting violent terrorism and extremism is concerned. In summary, Mr. Samoei.
Thank you, Mose. I think I had mentioned earlier that the ball stops with all of us. Whether it's that person in the village, whether it's a security expert, whether it's a police officer, whoever it is, the buck really stops with all of us. Number one, because you could ignore something that has come to your attention, that probably there is this person who is portraying some suspicious character, you know, moving around, doing blah, blah, ABCD. And you keep quiet with that information. Probably later to know that the person I saw at a particular place, probably living just across the road from where I live and has been behaving in a suspicious manner, is the person who has happened that, you know, to have committed this particular criminal activity or even the terrorist attack. We have seen these, that probably after they have been neutralized and probably their photographs have been taken, that's the time we begin to say, oh, so this person, we used to see him. He used to move from point A to B. There was that routine activity, you know, basing on the routine activity theories. And we kept quiet with this information. So right from a child, right from an old person, right from the youth, talk of everybody who lives within the society has a duty of care and a responsibility to report any suspicious activity or any suspicious persons, either to the authorities or the nearest, administrative organ, be it the chief's office. Anything at any level has to be reported.
Many thanks, Mr. Samoei. Now, finally, we come to Mr. Nyakomita. Some time back when there was a terrorist attack at Paradise Hotel in Kikambala, that was in the coast when President Moi was still in power. He had gone for some trip in the Middle East, he had to cut short his trip and came back. And I remember one of his comments was that I'll continue to join America in the war against this terrorism. On international partnership in the war against terror, because it is not a national-wide thing, neither regional, it's a global thing. What is your focus? What is your advice as far as international partnership in the war against terror is concerned? Is it at a good level, or a lot has to be done towards combating these menaces also?
Currently, it's at a good level, because I think most of the country came to realize that really terror activity is not an African issue, is not a nation issue, but it's actually an intercontinental issue that every state actually has to actually participate. And of late, if you check, you've actually seen a lot of either donation, contribution in terms of awareness that actually run globally in terms of actually ensuring that this particular terrorism activities are actually managed. Because if you look at the terrorism groups, you realize that we have international terrorist group. And one of the terrorist group that is also even actually affecting Kenya, or has been actually attacking us, is Al-Shabaab, which is also actually generals amongst Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and so on and so forth. But apart from the global perspective, then there must also be a certain level that we as a country, we actually have to ensure that we meet the global expectation. And this is actually what we lack in terms of life skill. Life skill and also mentorship. Because a child or a student or Form 2 student, if you ask him about terrorism, he will define to you terrorism in a different way. He will say terrorism are either this particular group of people, showing that she or he does not understand what terrorism actually entails. And I think that's why I started by saying that PISA came up with a mentorship program, whereby, yes, adult people know, and terrorism activity has been left for the security practitioners. If there's an incident, you call for security practitioners. But you as a person, what do you do as a Kenyan or as a citizen of any state? So the mentorship program actually is trying to ensure that as young as you are, as you grow, you realize that really there's a criminal element that if you actually realize within your state or within your age, you can actually say that yes, there's a criminal activity. And how do I actually act? If at all there's an attack, what do I do at my level as a student? So the PSAC is actually trying to come up with a lot of life skill in that when there's attack, we don't want a situation whereby attack comes on board and we have 100% incidents or casualties. Because a terrorist is not a criminal per se. He's not a robber who wants to rob you something. He's somebody who wants to kill you. So all the active or the measures of active shooter in terms of reaction should actually be trained to people. You've seen quite a number of videos and training in terms of Europe or any other country. They're trying to actually ensure that the sentenced people in a way that they understand in the event of an attack, how do I handle this? How do I identify a criminal and so on and so forth? So back to your question, I think we've done much as a country and also globally. I think since it became a global issue, most of countries have realized that I can be attacked, somebody can also be attacked. So we have to actually join hands together and fight this particular scourge.
Many thanks, gentlemen. Just before we come to the end, I'll have to read some of your comments. That is Roger Mosebo. He says he's watching live from Kariobangi, North Nairobi. Very educative discussion. Many thanks, Rogers Mosebo. Your comments keeps us going. Sarah Ngeleche tuned in from Lesos, Kitale. Very many thanks, Sarah. We also have Rish Arun Par. Very informative and helpful. We also appreciate. We have Arimi EK watching from Meru. Many thanks, Arimi EK. And then we also have from Samuel Anampiu, who is actually a very good contributor, always here. He says a professional criminologist and a PCK member, terrorism threats are real world over. Hence, this debate is good for the general public to become aware of concepts and metamorphosis dynamics so that to enhance security countermeasures perception. Jam, watching from Kirinyaga, I study criminology and topic is much educative. Many thanks, gentlemen, for such a wonderful discussion. Mr. Philemon Samoei, who is an expert in physical and security expert, has taken us through a very wonderful part of what you need to understand on the protocols as far as terrorism threats is concerned. Also, Mr. Nyakomita has taken us through his part. He has showed us what it means to follow the laid down procedures as far as war against terror is concerned. We appreciate your overwhelming responses on our social media platforms and also on our SMS number. It keeps us going and gives us the morale to keep on fighting towards seeing that we combat crime, not only to reduce it, but to make it fall completely. From me, Cornelius Omuse, on behalf of the director, CAT TV, content manager, fellow presenters, and all those, the technical team who made this production a success, we say thank you until next Tuesday. I wish you a very good night.